Rev up your engines! Here we go, blast from the past. Did you know they made Volkswagens in Pennsylvania? Mind you, the factory's been shut down for quite some time, but here's one of them. Now, it didn't come winter mint. They did not have this color back in the day, by any stretch of the imagination. But this is a diesel version. It does have power brakes, but it does not have a turbocharger. This thing is barely going to get out of its own way, even with a standard transmission. And yes, the smell of diesel fuel is everywhere, including inside the cabin. You want to get 50 miles a gallon in a car that's this old, this is definitely the thing you should get. Now, like I said, they were made in Pennsylvania. What, a motor roto alternator on a Volkswagen? What the heck Ford had to do with Volkswagen? I have no idea. I guess that was the cheapest deal they could get in Pennsylvania, and they threw them in. The reason they stopped making them in Pennsylvania is they had so much quality control problem, they just shut the factory down. Then they moved everything down south of the border after that one. Now it says it's got 239,000, but he figures it's well over 300 if you figured the real mileage out. And he did have the engine rebuilt. Now, it only cost him $1,500 to have it rebuilt. They're such tiny little engines, there isn't that much to them. And the old ones, these are actually quite simple. As you can see, it's still got a mechanical fuel injection pump. Now, the injection pump's still the original one. Back in the day, they were all mechanical. It took really good machinery, which the Germans are known for, to build these pumps. The main reason modern ones don't have them is because it's a lot cheaper to put electronic crap on that you can control by computers that costs absolutely nothing to manufacture. This stuff, you can't make it cheap, but this is still the original one. It still runs perfectly fine. We'll crank her over here. Now that's the sound of a solid diesel engine, which is one reason many people don't like diesels. They're noisy, especially these old ones. The modern ones are a lot quieter. These are noisy machines, but they can run forever if you take care of them. And yes, it does smell like an old bus. And when you get inside, they're noisy cars. If you want quiet, don't buy one of these. It's an econobox car, very little insulation, basic instrumentation. Typical old Volkswagen. At one time, this one even had air conditioning. As you can see, the air conditioning compressor has locked up a long time ago. But it is a German car, so it has heat. Now, they were econobox cars, there's no arguing. But they still had disc brakes in the front, fashion drums, but for a car of this size, you don't need anything bigger to stop this thing. It doesn't weigh that much. And of course, how fast can you get going with a diesel anyway? As I said, they're not known for speed. The fastest he's ever got this going was 70 miles an hour down a big old mountain. Now, he's a paint and body guy, so he's got a really nice paint job that he's done on it. You fix up these old cars, they're cool. You're not gonna find something like this just lying around. I just find it amusing that there's such a thing as a rabbit diesel. Rabbits are supposed to be fast. That rabbit looks like he's running pretty fast. I would assume in a drag race that the rabbit would beat this car hands down in the quarter mile. Now, being a Volkswagen, you can do all kinds of things to these. You can get parts relatively cheap. He's planning on putting in a twin-turbo modern diesel engine, and of course, then it would fly, at least for one of these things, and it'd be a nice sleeper car. People would see it's an old rabbit diesel, they'd think, oh, let's laugh and race them. Well, with the twin-turbo, you get a lot more zip out of them. So let's take it for a spin. Off we go, and let's see how fast this thing really is. Here we go, on your mark, get set, go! Oh, look! We're really moving! Look at that! Oh, I think it's faster than me. And yeah, it's got a bumpy ride, but these are actually fun little cars to drive around in. It's just that the diesels were never popular in the United States. Now, I had friends in Canada that love these things because they don't mind diesels. And they're cheap. They love the fantastic gas mileage. Well, we got the heat on and it's actually working. Only one problem. It's not blowing diesel smell into my face. And like I said, if you don't like noise, don't buy one of these. These old diesel engines are loud, plus the lack of any insulation in the car. You get all the road noise too. It combines everything. Now you're gonna buy one of these, make sure the frame isn't all rotten away. This one doesn't look bad, but here we have a lesson to be learned. These are very thin cars. Do not jack them up on the rocker panels or they will bend like this one has bent. Some fool tried jacking it up here and it just went crunch. That's how thin these cars are. Now, it was the previous owner that did that. He got it this way. So, and it's not really a structural damage thing, but that's why you don't jack them up in a unibody construction vehicle unless you know you got a good solid jack point. Don't jack them up on the rocker panels. In defense of this car, the rocker panels are still nice and solid. The first car I ever had was an Opel, and those rocker panels didn't last 6 years and they rotted away from the salt up north. You want to check for rot damage on any of these Volkswagens if you're getting one, especially if it's as old as this thing is. Now, one advantage of getting these as classics are, they're not that expensive to do. He's done everything over, the engine, the suspension, and he's got about $5,000 invested in the whole car. Of course, he's a paint guy, so he did the paint stuff himself. If you're going to pay somebody to do a really good paint job, you could easily spend $5,000 just on the paint job. Now, I gotta say, if you want a piece of history, inexpensive, but that's still reliable transportation. Just don't get in any drag races with this thing, or you'll be embarrassed. But let's face it, this particular one stands out. Nice color. A Volkswagen made in Pennsylvania. You know, you're not gonna find too many of them left. Most of them rusted out. The gasoline ones are long gone. Their engines are all blown, and people didn't put any money into fixing them. So the ones that are left, if you could find a non-rusted one, you can have a lot of fun and still have some pretty dependable transportation. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Angela Sombrano says, what do you think of Ford Fusions? They were pretty good cars when they first came out, and they're actually quite well-made cars. But unfortunately, as time went on, Ford got away from Volvo, and they had problems with some of them. The transmissions had some problems, and they don't make them anymore. It was kind of a merger that fell apart over time, kind of like the Ford GM 10-speed automatic rear-wheel drive transmission that Ford and Chevy made together, but then they came to arguments, and then they didn't make it. For Chevy, split apart from it. Now Ford's having problems with them there, so it was kind of a failure over time. I liked them. I used to rent them. I liked driving around in them, but they just were a failure over time. Robert Emus says, what do you think of a Suzuki XL7 2002? Suzuki makes kick-butt motorcycles, some of the fastest motorcycles in the world. Their cars, they were a massive failure in the United States. Other countries, they weren't failures because the things didn't cost that much, got really good gas mileage. Other countries where gas is $5, $6, $7 a gallon, it's a big deal. Here in the United States, where gas is always pretty cheap, they were pretty much a failure. Nobody really liked the things. It wasn't something that anybody particularly wanted. So if you're in the United States, they're not easy to get parts for, and a lot of guys don't have the equipment to work on them. So unless you're in another part of the world, I would not advise buying one. Josh Laporta says, Scotty, what's your opinion on the 2022 Subaru BRZ new design? They're decent cars, but I've driven them and I'm not impressed. I think they're kind of slow. You know, it's just that stupid boxer engine, 4-cylinder boxer, not the greatest, old-fashioned design. Subaru's been into it for decades, but, you know, they're trying to sell it as a sports car, and to me, it's too slow. If you're going to buy a new car, you pay that kind of money, you get a car that's as slow as that. You know, the Toyota one is exactly the same vehicle. Subaru makes them, and then they put Toyota badges on them, but they're still the Subaru. I'm just not a fan of those things. They look cool, but for me, for the kind of money you're paying, I think they don't have enough oomph to them for me. Rhett New asks, Scotty, the VW Vanagon hasn't been touched upon your wisdom. It's time. The Vanagons, they were fascinating vehicles. I knew people, hippies, that had them in the 60s. Tiny little engine, but they could go, cheap to run. Don't get stuck in a windstorm. They get blown off the road because they're boxy. They didn't weigh much. All the motor weight was in the back. The front would just blow right over. They were cheap. You could drive them forever. Change the engines up pretty easily. Unfortunately, as time went on, time passed them by. And they even tried that deal where they were putting the water-cooled heads on the air-cooled engines on them, and those were absolute disaster, airy piles of crap. But somebody's talking about bringing them back as an electric vehicle. And that would be kind of cool because they were pretty revolutionary back in the day. And if you make an electric vehicle with them, hey, that'd be kind of revolutionary too. So maybe they'll come back and be as revolutionary as the early one was until time passed them by. Roberto476 says, have you ever thought of doing another TV show? I'd watch it. Well, you know, TV's dying, the internet's flying. I'll probably never go back to TV. Those guys are dying. I got no money. All the advertising is going to YouTube and the internet. It's interactive. You can ask me questions. I can feed it back. Television, it's not that way. It's a dying culture. And I mean, there's a billion channels out there with a billion lines of garbage running on them. Why waste your time? It's kind of funny. I moved from Houston here to Tennessee, and I cut out all my TV. I stopped paying AT&T a couple $100 a month. You know what I miss? Nothing. I don't care. I can watch what I want on YouTube or Netflix or Amazon Prime. So I'll never be going back to TV. You know, one, there's hardly any money left there, and two, it's not interactive. You don't get the feedback like you do on YouTube here. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, Remember to ring that bell.